Hi, everybody. My name is Monik, and today we'll be going over OpenTok Broadcasting. Welcome to the series of Building with OpenTok series. In this series, we usually go over a lot of webinars, a lot of content on different APIs. So essentially, we want to be able to teach you and give you material so you can learn from. And today we'll be discussing broadcast APIs. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And in this screen, you'll be able to see the different kinds of webinars we've done in the past, and also what you can do here, learn from here. And then in the past, we've done SIP, network test, recording, Swift, and other ones. Before we get started, I do want you to take a minute to take a look at the polls, answer some questions that we have, and then ask any questions that you have. And in the comment section, talk about any topics that you want us to discuss from. So before we get started, I want to talk about today's agenda. We'll be going over OpenTok basics, OpenTok broadcasting, and a sample application with OpenTok broadcasting in Node.js and going it live with Facebook and YouTube Live. So to get started, the basics, these are core concepts that are really important for any OpenTok applications that you build. There's sessions, tokens, and publishing and subscribing. These are concepts that are required for all client sides, so any application you build is going to be around these topics. So a session is essentially a chat room. This is where users interact. It has a unique session ID. It's generated on your app server or the account dashboard, which is what we'll be doing today. And this is where users can publish and subscribe. For right now, we're in this virtual session right now. I'm publishing. All of you are subscribing to my stream. My stream is the video of my face with the camera and also the screen that I am publishing as well. And we all have a token. So a token is a user's key to the session. For me to be able to join a session, I need a token. That's what's used to authenticate. It also can be, it expires after a certain period of time, and that's set by the developer. And it can have metadata that describes the client. So you can put in information about, what this person, what this user is or what they do. We recommend that you don't, pass any personal identifiable information through the token as well. And then back to publishing and subscribing, they're just a way to publish audio and video streams. And then subscribing is viewing a stream, publishing is sending a stream, as simple as that. One thing to note also on a session that I kind of missed, I'm going to go back to the slide here, is that there are two types of sessions. It could be a relayed session or a routed session. A relayed session is a peer-to-peer session where the OpenTok media server is not involved, and then we have a routed session. And the routed session is where you send the media to OpenTok, and then OpenTok distributes it out to other clients that are connected to the session. And that's a really key important feature to know for our broadcasting sample here. That's why in this API model slide that we have right here, you can see these client 1 and 2 are publishing. They're not going to peer-to-peer. They're actually publishing to a cloud, which is, let's say, OpenTok. And then OpenTok can send the stream to the other people connected in the same session. And then you can also see that they also have session IDs and tokens. So this was generated on the app server. You make a request to OpenTok saying, hey, could you please create a session ID? And then the session ID is passed back to you. And then you create a token for that session ID and then pass it back to the client, which could be the web, iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, and so on. And then you can authenticate from there. So this is the core API model that we have, and that's really important to know. If you have any questions on building with iOS or let's say web, we've done these webinars in the past for a full walkthrough, so how you can build on the client side. But today we'll be focused on broadcasting, which is more of a server-side feature that we have. So let's get started on that. So broadcasting. What is broadcasting? Broadcasting is a way for you to connect to the masses, essentially. You can have different types of broadcasts, though. You can have an interactive broadcast where you are connected to clients in real time, where you control the number of publishers and also the amount of subscribers with a limitation of up to 3,000 streams, 3,000 members in that interactive broadcast. But then there's other ones in the past that. So we have RTMP, real-time messaging protocol, which allows you to connect through Facebook Live, Instagram Live, Twitch, YouTube Live, or any other provider that supports the RTMP protocol. And then we also have HLS. A lot of you can see HLS when you watch the Apple keynotes. They are the video player that's playing through there. So that has like an unlimited number there. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about those in just a little bit. Interactive broadcasting, as I mentioned, there's 3,000 participants that you can interact simultaneously in real time. The key thing to note here is it's just like a regular OpenTok session that's running. The only configuration change that you have to make is when you initialize the session, whether that's in iOS, Android, web, and so on, you have to suppress connection events. And that's just because you don't want to receive a connection created and a connection destroyed event every time a subscriber goes in and out. Because if you have 2,000 people in this, you're going to receive that event 2,000 times, and that's not necessarily something that you want to be going through. So that's what, and then you also have this, you can have a number of streams. So if you have one publisher, you can have 3,000 viewers because that's 3,000 streams that they're getting. If you have two, 1,500, and then so on, as you can see. So that's how interactive broadcasting works. This is really the real-time communication that you have with a mass audience. Now, a lot of the use cases here for this are, online classrooms. So you have sales meetings that are, running. You want to get to the kickoff meeting or any essentially knowledge sharing thing, or even, this specific thing. This is a interactive broadcast as well. Yeah, we don't have 3,000 people on the other end right now, but we still have a lot of people on the other side. So we chose to do an interactive broadcast here. And we have other people like, where you can do active fan participation. So we have it where you have an interactive broadcast, there's a celebrity, and then the celebrity brings on a person from the audience, and then that's broadcasted out to the masses. So those are other use cases that you can see. And there's a lot of them. So if you have any questions, definitely check out our website, talkbox.com. Just talkbox.com actually has a link on broadcasting, so you'll be able to see information there. So now to HLS, we mentioned this a little bit over here. This is intended for large audiences. Actually, it's an unlimited number of audiences that you can support here. So when you're publishing from one end through HLS, HTTP live streaming, you can actually have unlimited people watching it on your browser or in an app player, whatever that has a video player essentially. There is about a 15-second delay that OpenTok adds. It's not real time, hence it allows us to, it goes over a CDN, and then it can be distributed over the masses. But you have a layout control. You have the ability to configure, stitch out a layout. You want it picture-in-picture, best fit, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And there is also HD resolution support, and then support up to 9 publishers. So you can have 9 people talking from different parts of the world, and going out to the masses. The only thing is, it doesn't support more than 9 at this time. So if you have a 10th person who's publishing, or 11th, they'd not be able to essentially, be broadcasted out. And then we'll show you all these different layout controls in a second. The other thing we mentioned was RTMP, and this is where also intended for large audiences. This doesn't necessarily have an unlimited number of people because the limitation is actually set by the provider, such as Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and so on. From our end, we push out the stream essentially, and on the other end, the limitation is set up through, let's say, our Facebook or YouTube. There's about a 5-second delay. So the benefit, from HLS to RTMP is we add a 5-second delay. There might be like another couple of seconds that the provider adds on the other end, but it's not necessarily 15 seconds long. And we do support HD resolution here and layout control, and you can use our server SDKs to actually get started with these. So it's not something that and we'll be showing that in just a second. And you might come to a question like, why should I not just do just Facebook Live on its own or YouTube Live? Why should I have to go through this RTMP service, etc.? Well, we allow stitching. So you can stitch the layouts, and you could be anywhere in the world. So I could be here, somebody could be Singapore, somebody could be in London, and we could be having this conversation, and then we could stitch everything together and then send it out as one, as one broadcast. So that's the benefit. There's not a lot of controls like that available out there, and this is all done programmatically. So that's really the best part of it. And now back to the layout control. This is pretty neat because, when there's a lot of people in the broadcast, you want to have a defined layout so people can be focused. Some people who are, maybe the speaker is focused, everybody else who's not talking at the time becomes a smaller window. And we have predefined layouts, so it's best fit, picture-in-picture, and you can actually define custom layouts using CSS as well. So I'm actually going to take a second to hop onto a different screen, and then I will show you the, different layouts here. that we have. So this is the best fit layout. It's essentially a tile, Brady Bunch, whatever you want to call it. Essentially, you have a tile, and then it programmatically moves people around. And remember, this layout supports up to 9 streams. And then there's the picture-in-picture, where you can define the full screen and then the small, and then continue on to the vertical presentation, where the focus screen is essentially the big part, and then you have little tiles on your left that tell you which ones the other participants are in the broadcast. And keep in mind, we're only talking about publishers at this point, not the subscribers on the other end, because they're not going to be on the screen. They're just going to be the viewers of this session, broadcast. And then you have horizontal presentation. So we have the big focus here and the tiling at the bottom, essentially. And then you can also do your layout, custom layouts type. And we're sharing this link in the chat with you, so it'll be really helpful. It's the live streaming link for a developer broadcast guide. And we'll send a lot of these links out as we go on. So we talked about layout control here, but a lot of the questions that I get is, hey, can I change my layout in the middle of a session? Absolutely. So as the broadcast is happening, the speaker focus goes from person A to person B. You can make person B the big focus and then person A the smaller tile as well. So you can update these layouts as the broadcast is in progress. And so now back to our API model again. So as we mentioned, we had a session ID token and app server and the cloud. You have to trigger on your app server the start broadcast session. And when we talk about broadcasting here, this specific slide, we're talking about our HLS or RTMP broadcasting, not our interactive broadcasting. So this is where through HLS you say start broadcast. I want to do HLS or RTMP. You can do up to 5 RTMPs at a time. So Instagram, Facebook, whoever supports RTMP, YouTube Live, you can do 5 from one point. So I'll show you with 2 how to do it today to YouTube Live and Facebook Live. But then what we do is from the cloud, we push that out to those providers. And then you can do HLS, RTMP all simultaneously. So now that we have this going, let's actually take a moment and see what this code would look like. And before we do that, I need to go over some concepts on having a session and token. So we want to be able to generate these sessions and tokens, but we have to have an API key and an API secret. A secret, that's something that's not shared. You obviously put it on your server. It's not available to the public because it's your signature to be able to generate this material. So I'm actually going to go to the OpenTok TalkBox dashboard, available on talkbox.com. I'm going to click create a new project. In this new project, I'd be able to create 2 types of projects here. It's a video chat embed or an OpenTok API project. We're concerned with the OpenTok API project at this point, because we're going to be, utilizing the API. But if you wanted a drag and drop solution, essentially, you could test out the embed solution there. And we've already done a webinar embed, so if you have questions, definitely check that out. So we're going to go ahead and click here. We're going to add a project name. We're going to say building with OpenTok Broadcasting. Not that creative, so I'm just going to go with something simple. And then preferred codec. If you have questions about codec, highly recommend you read this article right here. We're going to stick with VP8 here, as that's the one that's most broadly supported at this time. We're going to click create here. So just give it a second. It'll go ahead and create. So obviously, I'm sharing through my screen with this project API in secret. You should never do this. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. This is only for the sake of the webinar. And you can see in this dashboard that there's insights material available. So there's a dashboard. We also have an API that's recently released with this. So if you're interested in grabbing quality, usage, and error metrics, you can check out our GraphQL API for the insights and build your own dashboard. And we also have, other settings here, archiving and SIP, and so things that we've already talked about in the past. So for the sake of today, we're going to talk about creating a session and how to utilize that. So now that we are at this point, I actually want to just go ahead and start writing into some code, and then I'm going to, we'll go from there. So in my terminal, so you can see my terminal from now, I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. I'll call it OpenTok Broadcasting. As I mentioned, I'm not that creative, so I'm going to think of simple names that are easy to remember. So now in here, we're going to initialize an NPM project. The dash-y, so I can skip all those questions. This NPM project, because I have some dependencies that I need to install to run this little server, I'm going to actually go ahead and install OpenTok. This is our Node server SDK that allows us to do server things like create a session, create a token, start archive, start broadcast, zip dial, things like that. So you wouldn't need a server SDK or the REST API on the server side to be able to do all this information. And now we're going to also install Express just so we can actually have a little server going on. And we need to create a file. I'm going to call it server.js. And then let's go ahead and open this in VS Code let's open this in VS Code here for us. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully zoom in. I'm going to collapse this here. And I'm going to actually start writing some code here to get some things set up. So we have an Express server that we need to get started with. And obviously, we need to get some OpenTok features going. So let's go ahead and pull an OpenTok. And this is a server SDK. And to start our server with Express, we can simply do this. And then I'm going to create an OpenTok instance. So OpenTok, this needs an API key and secret. Remember I talked about these credentials that are super secretive and supposed to be on your server. And then we can also just start our server here. I'll choose port 3000. And then, if all goes well, we'll just console log the server started on port 3000. As simple as that. Obviously, we can start a basic server here, but we're not leveraging any OpenTok features. So to go ahead and add that, I'm going to just create some routes. We'll create a simple route here called start broadcast. And we'll obviously have a callback here. And in this, we'll actually pull in OpenTok, and then we'll do start broadcast. And then in the broadcast here, we need a session ID. So we'll have to pull that information in, and as we'll create that actually on the account dashboard. And then we'll have to give it some broadcast options. And then we'll give a callback here. And then in the callback, either there's an error. So there could be an error, which is, when the API server some sort of requirement you're missing, or your authentication wasn't proper, things like that. Server SDKs handles that for you. So if you set it up right here properly with the credentials, you won't really have any issues with that. But then you can have errors when somebody's not publishing in a session, and we try to attempt to actually start a broadcast, because you need an actual video to be able to broadcast. So now if there is an error, we can just simply say, okay, let's console log it for the sake of the demo. There was an error starting the session, the broadcast. And we can just console log here, and then we can say, okay, this is I'm going to say 500, send, and I can just say error. Or no, I'm just going to say there was an error. And then if all goes well, that means we have the broadcast object with us. We're going to actually set the, we're going to go ahead and set the broadcast ID, because that's what we need to actually be able to stop a broadcast. So we'll just say, okay, broadcast, and this broadcast object has a couple things, broadcast ID and some other things, and we'll talk about that in just a second. I'm actually going to go ahead and console log the broadcast object from start broadcast, and we'll just say broadcast. And this is on our server. And then lastly, we want to actually just send this over to our browser when we make the request. The JSON. So as you can see, the simple route that we created to start a broadcast, it requires a session ID, some broadcast options. Now we haven't added any broadcast options, and I'm holding on just a second because I want to create our stop broadcast method and then go from there. So here I want to have another get method, start stop broadcast, and we also have a request and a response. And in the callback here, we essentially want to. So here I set the broadcast ID as a variable in this Express server. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull it there. Obviously, in a production application, this is probably not what you're going to be doing. So we're going to have broadcast ID here. So now we have the broadcast ID. We can actually go OpenTok.stop broadcast, and then we do broadcast ID. And then this also has an error handler. So we can see if there was an error or not. So if we have an error, as you can see, we're just trying to cover our base here. There was an error stopping the broadcast. And then we can also have, oops, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. And then on the return here, when everything is good, we can say, okay, let's go ahead and just, we're going to set this to null, just the value. Because it won't, if we try to start it again, obviously that broadcast doesn't exist, or stop it again. And then we'll just say, let's console log broadcast object from stop project. And lastly, we want to return this JSON, and we'll just say okay. Boom. So as simple as that. So obviously in a production application, there's a lot more things involved. We're going to be hard coding the session ID because I'm actually going to be using the playground tool to start it. So I'm going to create a couple variables here. So say const session ID, and then we also have broadcast options. So let's go ahead and actually fill this information in here. To get our session ID, I mentioned that you have to either create it in your app server. We have an app server, or you can, generate on the account dashboard. The reason I want to generate on the account dashboard here, because I want to show you how you can connect it with the playground tool, and then how you can use that tool as kind of a debugger play to see how you just test out the features. I'm going to go ahead and create the session ID. I've actually copied this here. So I'm going to copy this session ID here, and then I'm going to go ahead and pull my VS Code here. So I've actually just gone ahead into my session ID, and now I actually also want to go into my playground tool. So this is the playground tool. This is one of the best tools that we have, well, in my opinion, because I play around with it a lot. You obviously, what you can do here is a way for you to explore the features that OpenTok allows you to have with just UI. So you don't have to programmatically do anything here. You just be able to publish and subscribe the different properties that we support, archiving and broadcasting. So to get started here, you have to have a project. In the project, you want to generate a session ID, or you can actually pull one from the API keys that you have. As you can see, I have like a million API keys. I'm actually just going to do the one session ID that we created. And you can specify if you have a token or not. I don't have a token at this time, so I'm going to actually have it create one for me. And then you have these different roles for the token. So a token can be either a subscriber, publisher, or moderator. And I can pass in this connection data that we talked about, the metadata essentially. For the sake of this, we don't really need to worry about that. So I'm just going to click and join this session. So as I join this session, it'll say, okay, here is the API key that you obviously had for the session ID. The archive mode, you have to manually archive it and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just connect. So you can see I have this great tool that does things step by step. In OpenTok, you have to connect and then select your options, publish the stream. So everything that's done programmatically, there's a step that's involved, and that's intentional, so you can understand the different steps that involved programmatically. Go ahead and click publish stream. They're going to ask me a bunch of options. So which camera do I want to use to publish my stream, and which what do I want to set? I'm gonna just click continue here. Now this is going to pull my camera lab right here. Obviously, there's a different view you're seeing. I have two cameras running here, but this is essentially saying, hey, publish from this stream, and this is what we need to be able to broadcast. If there is no publisher, we cannot broadcast because there's no media that's flowing. And there's other properties that you have, so you can cycle video. So if you had additional cameras or different environments, you could do that. As you can see, we have a broadcast feature in. I can actually simply just broadcast here through OpenTok Playground, and I don't really need to show it programmatically. But for the sake of the demo, I think it'll be really great if we can do it programmatically. So now that we're publishing, now that we have the session ID, let's actually go ahead and set our broadcast options. So our broadcast object is super simple setup. So we have options, and in these options we have outputs, because and in these outputs we have RTMP. So we're going to only do RTMP, but you can do HLS as well. And in this RTMP array of objects, I have to give it some IDs. So this ID, I'll say, okay, Facebook. This is something that I want to, my personal ID that I want to create. And then we have things like server URL, and this is the RTMP URL, and then stream name. And we'll grab these from our providers in just a second. So I want to just fill in this object. And now I also want to create another one. Oops. So in this here, let's clarify these curly brackets. So I have to create another one because I also want to do to YouTube at the same time. And then here I have my server URL, and this all grabbed from YouTube, and then stream name as well. Stream name, also sometimes known as stream key by other essentially by other providers. Some call it stream key. Some call it stream name. So we're going to do that here, and then you can define properties like max duration. How long do I want this to go for? We'll just say 100 seconds is the max that we want this broadcast to go for, and then let's say resolution. So I mentioned we support HD resolution, so let's go ahead and take advantage of that, and then we can go ahead and set the resolution here. And remember, we've already had this broadcast options that we're passing into the start broadcast method, and then we'll start. So a lot of the work that we're supposed to do on the client side, we're taking advantage of the playground tool to do it for the sake of the demo, and then we're going to go ahead and start our server. So let's go ahead and do node server.js, and looks like ta-da. So you're right. If I created this on the session ID, how does my computer know to be able to do all this? So to make these OpenTok calls, I need an API key and secret. This is the not so secret that I talked about earlier. I'm going to go ahead and grab this from here. So let's go ahead and add this information here. I'm just going to toss it right in this. And there we go. So I've now added my credentials. Don't plan on using these because I'm going to go ahead and delete the project right after the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and now try again. Let's hope our code works. And to do that, I'm just going to pull up the terminal again, and let's do node server.js. It looks like the server started. And then we have a couple of things that we still have to do before we start the server, actually. So I'm going to go into the Facebook. We have to actually add the server URL. So remember I mentioned you have to be able to add the stream key and then the server URL. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. These are also supposed to be kept private because you don't want anybody having access to your server URL and stream keys. So this is what it here, and then I'm going to copy this. We're actually also doing this on our Facebook Live page for TalkBox as well. So we're actually already doing live through Crowdcast, but showing it here programmatically. And then obviously I have the YouTube one. Oh, hey, there's me again. And then we have some credentials here that we have to do. And then see stream name key. And then we're going to just reveal. We'll copy it, and then we'll hide it. And then we're going to put this here. So I'm actually have to restart my server because we got a little too excited to get started before. And now if I click, where's my Facebook? Okay, now if I go ahead and go to localhost and do start broadcast, if everything works as expected, I should start seeing my feed in Facebook. So let's take a look. We got the information, and look, Facebook is now fetching my video stream. Yeah, it can take a few seconds for it to get started, but as soon as you'll see a delay though, so you won't be seeing me move right here and then there. So that'll happen, and then YouTube also should be getting it. So now YouTube is also saying we're live here. So we are live. As it says, the internet can totally see you. To stop this, you have to stop broadcast, and there is me from Facebook. So this is working with RTMP. As you can see, it was really easy. Sure, we hard-coded them some things, but the concepts around it are super easy. You want to broadcast something, you essentially just have to say, okay, start broadcast, feed it some options, and there you go. And then let's go ahead and actually stop the broadcast because why keep going? So we can do that. And then all code works. Looks like we were able to stop the broadcast. You can see I had set things like max duration to 100 seconds. So if I didn't stop it, it was going to stop anyways. But it's good to just follow through with the code that we've written. So you can see the concepts are really you're already publishing, you're already subscribing, all that stuff's done. There's simply another call that you have on the server side that's really going to be able to take care of the stuff here. So where can you find resources for this? Some of the stuff that I mentioned with the limitations of each broadcast, or unlimited users versus not, 15-second delay versus 5. We actually have guides that actually will talk to you about this. So if you want to see, let me pull up the right one. So we have HLS, and so we have here you can see we have the live streaming broadcast. So if you want to do HLS or RTMP, you can see these guides. They talk about the different types of, codec profiles, all the way to the resolutions that we support, different frame rates, and things like that. Some of the great things about HLS is you can give it like an HD resolution, but the video player on the other end can actually, if you're not able to ingest that kind of quality, you can actually set a lower quality. And other things about, how many streams that we actually recommend you publishing. It says 9 is what's supported, but after 5, we tend to sometimes see quality degradation on that. So all this is documented here on our developer center. So this is a really great place to get started. And another thing that I really wanted to talk about was that we did this sample app in Node.js, but that's not all we support. Obviously, you can use the REST API that's agnostic to the language, but if you're interested in getting helper server SDKs, we have 5 more SDKs in PHP, Java, Python, Ruby, and .NET, and then obviously Node.js. And you can do these, start broadcasts, and we actually have built-in sample applications into each of those repositories, essentially. So you can say, okay, I want to learn in Node.js how to build on the client side and the server side with HLS, and you'll see these sample applications. So if I go to OpenTok/OpenTok Node here on my GitHub page, you can see we obviously have the Node SDK. A lot of the README talks about so much more than just the broadcasting. But if I was really concerned with the broadcast sample, I just go into sample, broadcast, and then ta-da, and then it'll just walk you through how to do different layout, how to do RTMP, how to do HLS, and things like that. So all this is really available and very, very documented on our developer center and our SDKs. So I'm going to go ahead and take a minute to actually take some questions and see how we can answer some questions and see the poll results and things like that. So it looks like I'm actually going to stop my playground because 2 cameras are going right now, so it's confusing me to which one I should look at. So so we've had some in the poll here. There's a couple questions that we've asked. Do you have any use cases for few too many broadcasting as discussed? Some people are saying yes, we're starting to explore this. Some people have already deployed them, so that's great. And some people, maybe in the future that they're interested in. So definitely check out our resources for the ones that have already had experience. Definitely let us know how we did. If you have any questions, let us know. And then, are you currently using non-WebRTC streaming? So yes, they're using HLS with CDNs. I'm sure that you would want to have a larger audience, and so that's a really great way to do it. And keep in mind, we only showed Facebook Live and YouTube Live today, but you can do Twitch. You can do anything else that supports RTMP, essentially. And then we also just had a question in the chat that I'm looking at. What does interactive actually mean? Great question. Interactive means that we're doing things in real time. People can say publish, subscribe in real time, and this is so the real time essentially was the interactive part. You can so I think that's the easiest way to clarify that question. And go back to the question. Where is the 3,000 limit from exactly? Yeah, so the 3,000 limit is essentially coming from the medias. So obviously there's other stuff that's been done here, but the hard limit right now is 3,000 streams that we are not able to. After that, we don't currently support at this time. But it's related to media options here. Which of these broadcast services support text chat for all recipients? Great question. So broadcasting that we spoke about was just video specific. But if you wanted to create a messaging server, a messaging application right next to it, you could use our OpenTok signaling or our Nexmo in-app messaging. We just did a webinar on the Nexmo in-app messaging recently and signaling. And we actually have a sample repository which has iOS, Android, and an API server built, fully fledged out applications that we've open sourced and recently. So check out the interactive broadcast, and I can post these links right after our in the comment section. So I'll post them for interactive broadcast, JS, Android, and iOS, and the API server as well. Is this supported in the PHP SDK? Yes, it is. So great question, Ken. We do have it in PHP SDK. So if you check out OpenTok-PHP-SDK, you'll be able to look this up there as well. I'm not super clear what OpenTok is handling and what is the point of third-party FB Twitch takes over. Maybe just a quick detail of what you're offering exactly would help me. Great question, Philip. So OpenTok, obviously, so you have this application that we want to broadcast. So let me take a step back. As a user, if I wanted to go to Facebook Live, I'd have to pull up my phone. And then if I have a peer who's sitting in, I don't know, Argentina, that I want to be able to go Facebook Live with them as well, they would not be able to go in with me together, right? They have to be at the exact same location. They can't be virtually anywhere else. So OpenTok, first of all, bridges that gap. You can have real-time video communication where you can connect with parties all around the world. And then for the broadcasting aspect, you really want to just put them together in the same session and then, connect RTMP, Facebook and stuff. But keep in mind, this is optional. You don't have to go through Facebook or, any of these providers. You can just have an HLS viewer on your own website as well. Hopefully that answers your questions. Let me know if you need any more clarification on that. Sorry if I missed this. Can OpenTok composite multiple RTC sessions before sending off to FBYT? You'd be actually doing one session at a time. One session to one broadcast, essentially. You can do multiple sessions and then obviously have them concurrently running to broadcast, but the RTMP URL would be different for each of the sessions. But you can actually have 5 RTMPs going out from one session at the same time.
Many people.
And obviously a lot of people in the session, yes. So on this broadcast, we're able to enable compatibility mode that basically has a delay from the live. I believe you guys are using the RTS to do that. So this application, Crowdcast, is built on top of OpenTok. And let me go ahead and share my slide to just talk about that real quick here. Yeah, it's using HLS, which is the HTTP live streaming. It's what Apple uses for Keynote. But let's go here and go to this. So to just keep going on the questions, Gabriel, we have partner examples. We have, Crowdcast.io, Livestorm, Kickstarter Live, Disperse. A lot of these people who are using OpenTok Broadcast APIs, what they allow you to do is either obviously have this interactive broadcast where there's not that many participants, so we'll do everything in real time. But after you exceed that number of participants, you might want to do it over HLS, so you can have that stream obviously on browsers. And the compatibility mode is when there's too many numbers of viewers and you can't support it in real time anymore. And then obviously RTMP and stuff. And for RTMP, you can use this. We actually are doing this over RTMP as well. So you can look at the Facebook link and check that out. So yeah, hopefully that helps. And then back to the questions again. Do you provide free space RAM for developers? By free space, I think you're talking about credits. We offer $10 credits to get started with OpenTok, and hopefully that's enough for you to get started, but definitely get in contact with us if that's not enough to get started with the API. Is HLS stream adaptive, meaning you're transcoding a single bitrate into multiple bitrates and the player can choose the optimal bitrate for the performance, or is it a single bitrate app being published and consumers must be able to handle that? So on the other end, great question. So when we send a stream out, on the other end, the player can decide different streams at the, when you ingest that stream, when you can say, okay, I can only view HD or I can only view, something less than that, you can define that on the other end. But you can send in a stream. So you send in like HD that we did, on the other end, you can throttle it down as needed. Great question, Charles. Kai, can I stream video to Instagram? Yeah, I believe Instagram supports RTMP, so you should be able to do that. We use OpenTok for our telehealth application. Is this a new version we will need to upgrade? Great question. No, you do not have to upgrade. The latest supported SDKs already come with this. This has been supported for a while. It was just a topic that we wanted to cover because of some asks from developers. What's the latency? What latency does OpenTok have with calls with, say, Argentina and Europe or the US? Great question. It's not something I can answer just looking at it, but we usually have about a 300 millisecond latency around the sessions that we have. But keep in mind, it's different for peer-to-peer versus routed. It depends on the number of parties involved, your network connection. So there's a lot more things involved than just being able to say that. So if you have any specific use case where you're behind a firewall or you have people on mobile devices and things like that, and you want to really get an estimate, get in touch with me, Monica at talkbox.com, and I'll see if I can help you out in more detail. But if you have a session, let's say you've already done, you can actually check out our inspector tool, and our inspector tool tells us the bitrate you get, latency, the packet loss, and all that that's available. So you can actually check that out for yourself. So definitely check out our inspector tool. And the inspector tool will also show you information about broadcast APIs. So how many minutes you've used with RTMP and HLS and things like that. There is a little delay on HLS and RTMP and the logs that come in for the usage, but the actual client logs that we have, they're there in inspector at all times. if I had two presenters, one with a webcam and another with just a phone to dial in, could I create a session to broadcast both feeds? When you say dial in, are you, I'm assuming this is dialing in with phone, or is this just, if they're both video, yes, you should be able to do it. If they're even dialing with SIP, that's a little different, but if you're doing video, you should be able to do it. So let us know how you're dialing in. I'd love to check in with you on how you're doing that. Great question. Does 360 video work over RTMP or HLS? Don't have the answer on top of that. I'll definitely answer this in the slots right after I check. Great question, Kevin. So we're going to take a moment. Let me see if the polls have really changed. Nope. More people just said no, they have not used their. Are you currently using non-WebRT streaming? More people have just said no. Everything else looks pretty much the same. Any more questions? Any more comments? Anything you want to see? Are you interested in seeing webinars on specific content for like Android or anything like that? We're also doing a webinar next month, about I think 4 weeks out, on custom video capturing, custom captures in general with OpenTok. So being able to play like an MP4 file into a video session and things like that. So we're going to talk about that. But if there are topics that you want us to cover or you want me to cover that have not been covered, definitely let me know right here, and we'll go from there. And one more question says, when will the code from today be online? The code is already online. So this code's been out there for a while. So the node sample, I'll just paste the node sample application in, but you can check out the other applications and server SDKs from the Developer Center here. You'll just go to Server SDKs, and then you can just click on Overview, and then here you'll be able to click on whichever one you're interested in, let's say PHP, and then you can go to the API reference, samples, or GitHub. Let me go for GitHub, and then it'll have some documentation on start broadcast, things like that. So this information is already available and out there. So definitely, check it out, and yeah. Happy to help, guys. Yes, broadcast has been up. All right, folks, if there's no more questions, we're going to end the webinar for today. Definitely check out the next one. And this is being replayed as well. So if you missed it, or if there's something that you want to cover when you're going to go back, the recording should be available within minutes. Thanks, everybody.